Hey guys, NanMan here, and we're going to be doing a new video segment each and every week, kind of featuring some new decks or old decks in Modern, depending on how things are going. Since we have just had a weekend of a lot of Modern coverage. We had 2 GPs, we had the SCG team event, and then of course all the classics that were taking place. There's another SCG event coming up very soon, so it's like all the Modern is happening right now, and a lot of people are trying to figure out where to go in Modern post Gitaxian Pro banning, post Golgari Grave Control banning. What's the meta going to look like? How are things going to be shaping up for the bigger tournament scenes? How your shop might start shaping up to be. So I started compiling a list of commonly seen decks in Modern, or more likely than not decks that you'll see in Modern. Pretty much almost every deck that you'll see if you go to a larger event. And as of right now, my list is around 38 decks. And you might sit there and go, 38 decks, that's insane. There's no way that there's 38 top tier decks. And no, there are not. There's those like tier 1, tier 2, more the fringe list, you know, whatever. But there are some lists amongst these that are top tier. You're going to see most likely than not. Like we've talked about those kind of rock based decks that are pretty popular right now. Jund, Abzan, Death Shadow, of course Tron decks. We've also got Eldrazi based decks, which could be Eldrazi Tron, could be Death and Taxes, could be Bant Eldrazi. You know, that we've got our prison decks like Lantern Control, the red white like Sun and Moon decks, if you will. There's the Dredge that's still around. Of course, like Burn, Affinity, Scapeshift, Goryo's Vengeance, Storm's coming back, Merfolk, different zoo lists. You even have like some Grixis or some control stuff. Some people are still trying out Infect. And then you got a little bit more fringy with like Living End, Ad Nauseam, Boggles. Like the list goes on and on of the different stuff. And so I wanted to start a, like I said, weekly show segment, if you will, to kind of highlight some decks in Modern. So as you guys start traveling around and competing at more events, you'll kind of be more familiar with the different decks and why certain people are playing certain decks, some ins and outs of it. Not as much deck tech oriented as it is, here's some snippets about why people are choosing to play this deck over that deck. And I figured the best way to start things out would be to kick it off with our winning deck from GP Vancouver. For all those guys out there that were not paying attention, would be the Death Shadow deck. Now, as you can see over this way, there it is. This is not the person that won. No, Sam Black did not win. So why am I featuring Death Shadow and Sam Black as the first one? Well, because he is the pioneer of the New Age Death Shadow. For those that are not familiar with Sam Black, he is kind of a crazy brewer and constructor of decks. He is one of our premier players that helped to get Summer Bloom banned in Modern because of his Amulet Titan deck, or Summer Bloom style that was originally around. And then he had been working on this deck for a little bit, and basically you saw everybody else on Channel Fireball rocking some variant of this list for the weekend, whether they were playing at the team event, which we did get to see. Of course, the person rocking out Modern, and I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head now, was rocking out a variant of this Death Shadow list. So I wanted to at least start it out with Sam Black. Now, if you're looking at the list themselves, for the most part, the Death Shadow lists that are out there are going to be Jund style. So that means they are going to be black, green, and red. We have noticed, though, that with Sam Black's list and a couple other lists, it's kind of a 4-color. Like post-sideboard becomes a 4-color. His is kind of 4-color because he is running main board Renegade Rallier, which is a sweet card from, of course, Aether Revolt. One of our new guys got that Revolt trigger. Nice and sweet, gets to return a permanent card with converted mana cost 2 or less, which means it could be getting back Tarmogoyf, could be getting back Death Shadow, could even be getting back some of his lands, could be getting back Mistress Bauble. You know, any of those are legal targets. So that is one of his white options. He is only running one Godless Shrine in his list, and does have access to some basically white sideboard cards here, like Kataki, Ranger here, which is actually works out really well with being able to find up those Death Shadow. I've seen a couple lists run at main, but that's just some of the variants you'll see. Lingering Souls is another big push for him to have that access to white available to him. But for the most part, the main shells are going to be Jund oriented. So that means they're going to have disruption to your hand. Inquisitions, Thought Seizes, them losing life is what they want to do. It's not the all-in version that it was previously, which was just like Ataxian Prove, Thought Seize, just strip away all this stuff. It's resilient Jund aspects to it. It's got the Goyfs, it's got this hand disruption, it's got removal, Abrupt Decay, Kolgun's Command, Fatal Pushes in there to really mess with people. And then it's got some draw ability with the Street Wraith. Oh, I lose some life. Sometimes you'll see players cast it in a pinch. 5 mana for a 3/4. Swamp Walk can be relevant, but that's not really where you want to be. They do have a Planeswalker package, more or less. Liliana is the go-to. Some have opted for Veil, some have opted for Last Hope, or a combination of both. But Last Hope seems to be our newest Lily to make waves in Modern. That kind of 3-cost, very relevant abilities. The -2, -1, pretty important. And being able to basically dredge away and get a creature back from your graveyard for his -2 makes her pretty sweet in general there. It's got the ways to turn on Delirium, because it is running Traverse, so it's going to be running Mistress Bauble there to get the artifacts in there. You also get some draw out of that, and you have that tribal instant, of course, with Tarfire. Some people have done some variants of it, but that tribal, because it is a goblin instant, does increase that Goyf a little bit more. So it's got the resilience of Jund, and that staying, that kind of like, oh, surprise, I can just kill you here with my Death Shadow. I'm down to like 3 life now, so guess what? He's a 10/10. And, oh, I'm running 2 Teamer Battle Rage in mine, so now he's, guess what? Got Double Strike and Trample. So, basically swinging for 20. Hope you have gained more life than that. So that is what a lot of the pro players are going to be playing for Modern, and I think a lot of players are going to start trying this out. It's in a way more resilient in that fact that Jund does a lot of damage to itself, like with Dark Confidants and things like that, and the fetching and the shocking, the Thought Seizes. It's easy to get down to a low life total, and now it just kind of, well, I'm getting to a low life total anyway because I'm playing Jund. Now I just have some extra value creatures, like, oh, they're 1-drops, so I can cast them and have other mana up to be able to Thought Seize you, or cast Fatal Push, or Abrupt Decay, or Kolgun's Command. Yeah, this seems great. So it's pretty sweet overall. Some pros have suggested if you're going to be playing Jund, this is the version of Jund that you should be playing. Death Shadow is where it's at. So just want to talk a little bit about Sam's list before hopping over to Raptors. Josh Utter-Layton, of course, the champion there. He does have a little bit variance to his, not running all that main board white stuff like with the Renegade. He opted for the Gore-Clan Rampager there to have that Blood Rush, be able to get +4/+4 and Trample. Just kind of a little bit extra push over. The Trample's nice. Now, you'll see both of these decks don't really have much evasion, especially in the main board. Like, they do have access to Lingering Souls for the sideboard, but main board is just, here's my creature. Here's my Disruption. We've got the Inquisitions. We've got the Thought Seize. Here's my removal, but I'm not really going to be going over you. I'm going to just have this big guy, and hopefully eventually we'll get through. I'll rely on my removal spells to help clear the way. So if you're playing a lot of creatures, like we saw against Merfolk, it was a much tougher matchup for the Death Shadow. So that Rampager's nice for the trample. Maybe we'll see some people start running like a Rancor or something for an extra, oh, it helps build up your Goyf because it's an enchantment. And hey, +2 and trample could be pretty relevant there. So, but again, the sideboard stuff is pretty much the same that you'd expect. We do see this variant that I was talking about. Here's Last Hope in the sideboard and 2 Veils in the main board for Josh. So just, you know, where the players want to be, there are those flex spots available for the Death Shadow list. But those are the Death Shadow lists that I wanted to talk about a little bit. I'll have deck lists posted up in the description, though, for those that want to look at these in more detail. But since this week we are talking about the 3, you know, rock-based decks, we're going to just slide over to kind of the more tried and true classic Jund. Why are people playing Jund over Abzan? That sort of thing. So what is the draw to playing Jund? Well, so you get access to red, right? So that means we do get some great stuff. Lightning bolts, sweet. 3 damage to face or 3 damage to creatures, sweet. I like that. Only costs 1. Easy to draw off those Dark Confidants there. Terminate, extra removal there. Red and black, destroy target creature, can't be regenerated. Pff, cool. Removal's great. You also get access to Kolaghan's Command, which kills artifacts. Again, can strip away cards from your opponent's hand, can deal 2 damage, and can return a creature. So that's, you know, all relevant modes there. Sideboard cards that are nice, like having Anger of the Gods. You could start running some Planeswalkers in there. Those are nice. Raging Ravine is another big draw to it. One of the best man lands in Modern. You know, Ink Moth, Blink Moth, all those kind of good stuff too. But this is powerhouse on its own. When it gets to these top deck wars and things are drawn out, hey, here's essentially a 4/4 coming at you. Then it's a 5/5. You know, it is easy to get this guy big. Starts out as a 3/3, but whenever this creature attacks, you put a +1 counter on it. So easy to get really large and out of control there. The other draw is, of course, Huntmaster of the Fells, making some werewolves, dealing some damage, gaining some life, all those kind of important aspects to it. Some other players have opted to run Pienkira and Alar as another way to kind of enjoy that Jund shell, have a little bit of invasion in there, getting some artifacts. So those are the big draws, but again, the disruption is the same across the board. Whatever list you're going to be running, you're going to have Inquisitions, you're going to have Thoughtseize, you're going to have Tarmogoyfs in here. Scavenging Ooze is a solid card to have in these lists. Some might have some in the sideboard, not as many main board, but for the most part, you're going to be seeing some Scavenging Oozes in there. And then, again, like I talked about with our Death Shadow, Liliana, go-to Planeswalker, whether it's Veil or not, most of the time it is going to be kind of that combination of Last Hope and Liliana of the Veil as we're going forward, or some people like the tried and true old school Liliana of the Veil, but I think going forward, having a split is kind of the best way to go about it. So, Cora, this is Ryan's 18th place list from Vancouver, so I wanted to showcase this a little bit, talk a little bit about why they're running this list. There's also, of course, 10th place here from Brisbane. Again, very similar to the last list, but this one running Kalidas in it, is running Pienkira as well. So the Kalidas is really nice, having the lifelink, because you are running the Dark Confidant, so you are taking damage off them. But it's dangerous to have too many 4-drops with Dark Confidant, because that is going to be the largest number you have and the most damage that you'll be taking. So you see, that's why he's got a sprinkling, 1 Pia, 1 Kalidas, 1 Huntmaster. Most of his stuff is going to be 3 or less. Kolaghan's and Lily are, of course, 3 drops. The rest are sitting, Maelstrom Pulse is 3. Inquisitions, Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, all those are at 1. But for the most part, again, the removal package, Disruption is all going to be the same across the board here. Sideboard does have access to things like Fulminator Mages, extra removal. You know, we see a Thundermaw Hellkite in there. So just some nice ways to kind of take advantage of red in your colors. And most of the good stuff that you're going to want to be running will be in the main board for that sort of package. But we don't see, for the most part, we don't really need Abrupt Decay. We have all this other removal spells. Okay, if it comes to a planeswalker, well, I can start swinging with my creatures. I've got lightning bolts that I can use and start directing that towards there. So that is one of the aspects to, if you're going to run Jund, you want it a little bit more kind of mid-rangey. Well, this is the path to go. If you want a little bit more staying power and, hey, I'm taking a lot of damage anyway, I'm going to run Death Shadow and just be able to get you there. So those are the aspects between Jund and Death Shadow. And then to round it up, we have our Abzan list, which a lot of people like, access to white. As Brett talks about, best card in Magic, Path to Exile. It's his favorite. But it's a good card for a reason. Gets rid of a creature there. Works really well against those Eldrazi lists. So that's why some people are favoring this more than others. So let's talk then about our draw to white. Why do people run white for the Abzan over the Jund list? Well, they get access to Path to Exile. They get access to Siege Rhino, which is a nice big guy here. 4-drop, 4/5, gain 3 life, deal 3 damage. He's got Trample. Nice. Lingering Souls is another one, having that evasion. Oh, look, I can flash it back later on if it gets to be a grindy matchup. Could deal some damage with that. You do have access to a really good variety of cards in your sideboard. Of course, some of those graveyard removals there. Gideon, we've been seeing some players try out there. But this is a list that is running that package, split package of Veil and Last Hope here, which is nice. For a while there, we had that kind of little Abzan style that we're running more Grim Flares, because it's easy to turn Delirium on, and nice to get him into a good spot here. This list is also running Noble Hierarchs, help ramp up into Siege Rhino, helps ramp into those Planeswalkers a little bit earlier. Could do some nice action. Exalted is nice as well, so having access to green and white mana off it, beneficial there. So not all lists are running Noble, but it is something to consider. But Gideon is definitely an easy port into this sort of deck. Now the man lands that the Abzan list run, Shambling Vent is solid pickup there because it is access to lifelink, and again, you are going to be taking damage off Dark Confidants and the Thought Seizes and Shocks and things like that. The Wildwood is another option, of course. Green and white there becomes a 3/4. It does have reach, so if you're playing against some other flyers out there, against Lingering Souls, if you're playing against those Ink Moss, the Blink Moss, that is beneficial. Now this does, of course, have the pass, has the Fatal Pushes, and Abrupt Decay there. Not having access to Lightning Bolts, it's nice to have that extra interaction against certain Planeswalkers, or just some troublesome creatures. So that is something that is important to have access to there. So a couple more Abzan lists to show off here. Like we talked about, that it is running Scavenging Ooze as the option, Grim Flare, the Siege Rhino, stuff like that. But doesn't necessarily have to have all of the same numbers, and that's what's nice too. Fulminator Mages, things like that we saw in the Jund list, Collective Brutality, these things in the sideboard, Surgical Extractions, are kind of generic across the board for these sort of lists. It's like the Gideons and those extra powers is a big reason why people are running it. Now, Grimflare, like I talked about, some Abzan lists are really enjoying that. They like those kind of low to the ground, hey, I'll come in early, disrupt you a little bit. Turn 1, Thought Seizer, Inquisition. Turn 2, I'm laying down Grimflare, I'm laying down Tarmogoyf, that sort of aspect. This list is not running the Dark Confidants because it's running more Siege Rhinos. Feels more comfortable with that. Also, we do see the Spellbomb main board for that, which some people have opted for the sideboard. Again, that graveyard disruption is important in Modern. Especially when we've got some of these other decks running around, like Goryo's Vengeance and things like that. Now that we're seeing a lot more Goyfs running around, this could help shrink down those Goyfs a little bit. But you can draw a card off it. That's nice. Also, we do have those Collected Company base decks, which we'll talk about in another episode there. But so very powerful cards available for our Abzan list. Now, this is one of the lists. is running Gideon main board, does have an extra Gideon in the sideboard there. But I talked about some of our other powerful sideboard cards. Stony Silence is another big one. The Tron decks usually do pretty well against these Jund and Abzan lists, so having that access to kind of disrupt them a little bit is really important. Tireless Tracker has been a card that people have been testing around with in Modern for a couple different decks, but you know, fetching, you're basically getting 2 clues off it, which can come in handy in Modern. Extra draw power is nice. This is another variant that somebody has opted for because they've gone for the Voice of Resurgence and Tassiger route, and you can see they are not opting for the Dark Confidant route this time around, still taking advantage of the removal and disruption, of course, like Fatal Push, Abrupt Decay, Path to Exile, Inquisition, Slot Seizes, the normal stuff that you'd expect to see. But this list is kind of more geared towards your opponent playing a lot more spells, so can be beneficial depending on how your meta is shaped up to be. But again, it did get 10th place at Vancouver, so it's definitely a strong list to be going for here. Say these kind of fast lands is something that decks do try out. Blooming Marsh here, Concealed Courtyard, just kind of where you want to be, because you have most of your stuff costing around 2 on average. So Shambling Vent, again, of course, is the man land of choice for the Abzan list. So that's kind of our quick overdue, maybe not as quick as some people would have liked there, but for at least just kind of our Death Shadow, Jund, and Abzan list. Not going like full on deck text for it, but just kind of some thoughts and point of views about why you might play one over the other, some stuff to look out for, what the deck's trying to do, disrupt, destroy, and then just kind of swing in with powerful creatures like the Goyf. These lists are not running the extra stuff like Tarfire or Seal of Fire or things like that, because it's just not all about the Goyf and not all about that aspect of it. It's just, hey, this is a mid-range deck, so I have these powerful creatures that I can throw down early around that 2 mana, and then I've got disruption and removal to follow them up and just going to beat you down slowly, and then it can play that attrition war really well. So that's one of the big draws to people wanting to play these decks. They are, of course, more expensive because of Tarmogoyfs, but because of Dark Confidants and things like that. But just things to consider going forward into the Modern meta for everybody out there of what to look out for, and you definitely have to be prepared for those lists in particular. But again, this is going to be a weekly segment that I'm going to start doing, kind of highlighting each and every decks around there. Next week is all going to be about the Prison decks, Lantern Control, of course, because that did win GP Brisbane, and we're going to talk about that red-white one, or the Sun and Moon list that runs around there. So a little bit more of a mental game there for a lot of players. Mental fatigue goes along with those decks, and we'll talk about that, of course, next week. But if you guys like this sort of Modern spotlight, please consider hitting that follow button, subscribes, all that kind of good stuff. Of course, for those that are not familiar with myself, I do Modern coverage each and every week over on twitch.tv/Modern Magic Mondays. We, of course, have all of our VODs on YouTube under the same name, Modern Magic Mondays. And we've been going for over a year now, kind of one of the longest running Modern coverage streams going on, at least on Mondays there. So if you guys enjoy all this stuff, I do encourage you to hit those subscribes and follows, because that does help me out immensely. But that's going to do it for me here today, guys. I hope you all enjoyed all this little insight, and I'll see you guys next game.